Good morning. As part of my 2026 initiative to learn stuff about the web platform that I've missed over the last few years, I wanted to take a look at the dialog element. We've been building modal windows on the web for decades now, it feels like, and every implementation of the modal window tends to lack some degree of functionality. And the exciting thing about the native dialog is that they're just going to handle all that complexity, the accessibility, the tab trapping, the window, the mouse and keyboard interactions, marking the background as a nerd. It's all very exciting. This is the first time I've ever looked at it, so this is more a note for myself. Your mileage may vary. But essentially the dialog can open in two different modes. We have our non-modal and our modal. The non-modal means that the rest of the document can continue to be interacted with. I frankly don't see a whole lot of value in this for a couple of reasons. One, when you open it, you'll see that my browser jumped all the way to the bottom. And that's because the dialog element, if we look at the DOM here, is actually 100 rem below this horizontal rule. So the non-modal dialog appears to render sort of in line with where the document is. And also, because it's a non-modal, I can continue to interact with the rest of the document, which, again, that's just not how I've really ever used modal windows. The ability to open it as a modal dialog means that the rest of the document can't be touched, and that's where things get really exciting. So if we open it up as a modal, what you'll see is that we remain in the same place. I have a background pseudo element here that the browser is automatically adding that we can style, and you can see I have my little background blurriness being applied to it and a background color. It also gives a implicit ability to dismiss the modal just by clicking on the backdrop. That's something that you can disable with this closed by attribute. Also, if I just hit the escape key, that closes it, and you'll notice that the focus is returned to the active element, right? So if I click on toggle modal, the yes button is the thing that is now focused, and the browser's automatically doing that for me. It focuses the first focusable element automatically. You can also use the autofocus if you want to change that. And you'll see if I tab to the no and I tab back to the yes, and then I continue to shift tab up the DOM tree, I actually end up somewhere down here. You can see it did not go back to the rest of the DOM because the rest of the DOM at this point has been marked as inert internally. And if I hit tab again, you'll see I get back to the yes button. And then if I click here, again, the focus has returned automatically to the previously active element. So there's just like a lot of really exciting stuff about the native functionality that's being brought to the table here. Now, let me clear up my console here. And if I open this and then I hit yes, you'll see that we get closed with return value yes. If I open this and hit no, you'll see we get closed with return value no. And if we open this up and look at the elements, let me pump this up a little bit, you'll see that the submission buttons here have values yes and no. And just as an example here, we could say yes, 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 and hit yes. Let me go back to the console first. And you can see it's automatically taking the value from the button that's being used to submit the form, and the form submission is being used to close the modal dialog. And that's because, again, if we look at the dialog, you can see that inside of the dialog, we have a form, and the form method is dialog. And what that means is that when you submit this form, it'll be used to close the dialog and automatically take that value and set it to the return value property of the dialog. If we jump into the code for a second, again, we can see here that we have form method dialog that'll automatically close the form, the dialog with the form submission. But then if we look at our JavaScript bindings, we can see that we're binding to the close event of the dialog, and we're outputting to the console that return value property. So when you close the modal window with a form submission, it's going to take the value of the button and it's going to store it into this, which allows us to communicate some information back out of the dialog, which, I've never used this before, so I don't know how helpful that's going to be, but I could see it as being helpful, at least for certain little yes-no confirmation modals. A couple of other things to notice here is that I'm animating in the dialog by using keyframe animations, and I'm doing that based on the open attribute. So if we look at the DOM here, let's close this, and you see that here's the dialog. The only attribute here is closed by, but when we open the modal, you'll see that it adds the open state to the dialog. Now you can actually just remove this to close the modal, so it's a kind of reflective property, attribute property. But again, we're using that. I don't know if it's going to show up fast enough here. Oops, sorry. Let me refresh because I think I messed up the state. You can't really see, but it animates in slightly with opacity and with scale. Now you'll also notice if I close that the browser has a scroll bar when there's nothing open. That's because of that 100 rem bottom margin on the rule here. But when I open the modal window, there is no scroll bar on the body. And if I scroll my mouse up and down, which you can't obviously see, nothing is happening. Now that's not a feature natively added by the dialog, but I am using, if we look up here, some stuff that's not yet widely available in combination with stuff that is widely available. So when the modal window opens in a modal state, the modal pseudo class is available on the document. It's how we can target a modal it's how we can target any element that's been opened in a modal capacity. And I'm checking with the has selector, which is not yet widely available. I think it's like another year or two before that is classified as widely available in Google's baseline project. But what I'm saying is for HTML and body elements, and is widely available, if those have any modal window, then we're going to hide the overflow on the body itself. And that's how we get that scroll bar to appear and then disappear when the modal is open. In fact, if we look here at the body, we can see that it's matching on that has an open modal. And you can see if I remove that, that scroll bar comes back and forth on the body there. Anything else of interest to show? Again, that pseudo element, the backdrop, that's just added for us. The only other thing I wanted to really show here was that historically, when I implement a modal, when I've handcrafted an artisanal modal, I haven't just had the modal. What I'll often have is something that wraps around the modal to allow the modal to scroll within the viewport of the body. The browser doesn't do that natively. The thing that they've chosen to do, and we can demonstrate this by jumping in here, and let's just throw a big top margin on this. So let's say, what are the new logical ones? What is it? Margin, block, start, 100, let's say 500 pixels. What you'll see here, when we have too much content to show within the viewport, that scroll bar that I would have normally had on the body is inside the modal itself. So that's just a minor thing. You probably don't want to have more content in your modal that can fit in the viewport. That's probably a pretty bad anti-pattern. But just to be aware that that's the choice, the trade-off between the simplicity of the native modal is that they're putting that scrolling inside of the viewport. Of course, you can build anything you want, so you could probably change this, but that's just something that I noticed as far as a deviation from the way I would have normally built a modal window. But yeah, pretty exciting to just have this in the tool belt ready to go. I feel like that's going to reduce a lot of the complexity of any modal interaction that I have going forward, and it seems like it's a pretty robust, pretty solid solution. It seems fairly easy to style. Let me refresh to get rid of that. It seems fairly easy to style. I did try to get it to a sidebar. That took a little trial and error and a little investigatory Googling, but that's able to be done. I can do that in a follow-up post for funsies. But yeah, I'm just excited to finally take a look at this and excited to have this in my arsenal going forward. Happy 2026.